And let's go to the book of Genesis. Genesis is where we've been studying for some time now. And we're going to be hopefully getting close to the end of our study tonight in the book of Genesis. So go to chapter number 47. Now what has happened is Joseph has gone down into Egypt. He's been there now. He's 39 years old, and he left when he was 17 years old. And now he's met his brothers again. They've reconnected. Dad's coming down as well as the whole family. And this is how the children of Israel get into Egypt. They're invited to come in. They're set up in one of the perfect situations, they think. But as I've always said, anytime you are not separated or segregated from the world, eventually the world will take control of you. And so over the time, they will take control of the children of Israel. The children of Israel will be there 400 years, and then God will deliver them. We'll see that in the book of Exodus. So they're getting down into Egypt. Verse 1 of chapter 47 is where we're at. Then Joseph went and he told Pharaoh and said, "My father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds and all they possess, have come from the land of Canaan, and indeed they are in the land of Goshen." So they've made the transition from the promised land into the world, or into Egypt. And he took him 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" And they said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers." And they said to Pharaoh, "We have come to dwell in the land because your servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now therefore, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen." Now let me just say, as an aside, I don't know all that took place, but the famine was only going to last 5 more years. But they didn't stay just 5 years. And when the land of promised land got better, they moved back to the promised land. No, they came and planted themselves. And again, I know I've already said it. I just caution you that when you plant your kids in the world, we got to be in the world but not of the world. When you get too close to the world, bad things are going to happen. And so they came to dwell, it says in verse number 4, to dwell in Goshen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your father and your brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock." Then Joseph brought his father Jacob, set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. I wished I'd have looked this up again. At this point, Jacob dies at 147. If I remember right, he's like 120. I'd have to look it up again, but he's about 120 years old. And even in that time, that's a pretty old age, okay, at that time. So this is a guy who's lived on the earth quite a while, and Pharaoh is kind of fascinated with him, particularly since he raised Joseph and he knew what kind of man Joseph was. It says that Joseph brought his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. That's pretty interesting. Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Remember when it was Melchizedek and Abraham, it was Melchizedek who was the greater blessed Abraham. And it says the greater always does the blessing. And here, it's not Pharaoh that blesses Jacob, but it's Jacob who blesses Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How old are you?" Here we're going to get to it. And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130. I missed it by 10. 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to my father's days in pilgrimage." You better remember how old his dad was. His dad was Isaac. How old was he when he died? 180. How old was Abraham? 175. And so Jacob had said, man, I'm not even close to what my dad and my granddad were. I'm just got a few years compared to them. And then in verse number 10, so Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. And Joseph situated his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramsey, as Pharaoh had commanded. Then Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with bread according to the number of their family. And so they lived off the fat of the land, and they were taken care of for the next 5 years while the famine would continue to go on. In verse 13, now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe. So that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So when all the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed. We spent all of our money. we brought everything. We bought what we could buy, and we're still hungry. We still got some famine left. So help us out here. And here's what the government does. As I said before, when you start depending upon the government, eventually they will get all the power. Again, I'm not opposed to government. God appoints governments, and God puts them there. They're ordained by God. They are His ministers, supposed to be for good things. And yet, at the same time, most governments, when they get an opportunity, they will use whatever crisis they can to gain more and more power. And they think they're being benevolent in doing that, that if they can just control the economy and if they can control the people, then everything's going to be good, all right? You're going to have good things going to happen. They've always thought this way. If we can just have a one-world government, if we can just have one-world religion, if we can just have a one-world economy and so forth, all things are going to work out accordingly. And so here Pharaoh had the grain that was being sold to them was grain that was taken from them in the good years. And now they're selling it back, and now the people are coming and saying, we got no more money. And so here's what is the policy of the government. It said, give us bread in verse 15, for why should we die in your presence? Our money has failed. Verse 16. Then Joseph said, give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herd, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. Now when that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, we will not hide from my lord that our money's gone. My lord also has all of our herds of livestock. There's nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate. And so again, we see that the government is garnered all the wealth, and now they're making slaves of their own people, and they now possess and control all the land. Now, we're going to see in a little bit, they don't control the land of the priest. That apparently in that time, that was forbidden for them to own the land of the priest. But now they have all the capacity. And when they start doling out not only food and giving them food or grain so they can make bread and so forth, they're going to give them grain to plant, and now they work for the government. Because what you plant now belongs to us. We're going to let you keep some of it, type thing. The land is ours now, and therefore you work for us. Again, I'm not going to harp on it. It's just beware of these sort of things. That is just in the nature and the heart of people, that they want more and more and more power. And thank the Lord, our forefathers were smart enough to set up a system whereby we did not, or supposed to not, have that sort of issue in the United States of America. Questions or thoughts on that before I go on? I've harped on that probably enough. The question was, is Joseph getting kind of evil here? I don't think necessarily this is Joseph's policy. I think this is Pharaoh's policy, and he's acting on behalf of Pharaoh. I could be wrong. It could be that this is Joseph. If Joseph was strong enough, Joseph could have said, now listen, Pharaoh, this is not the way you do things. You don't enslave your people. During a time of crisis, you don't take advantage of your people, but that's just what happened. Good to have you back, brother. Gosh, you came with the surgery this morning and in church tonight. Good to have you. All right, any other question? Yes. Yes, most leaders in the world have been non-believers. Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar was a non-believer. All the pharaohs were non-believers. Yes, God ordains governments, but that does not mean that God chooses only believers. And the sad thing is in our government, we are the ones who choose the leaders. And I don't know if you know this, John Jay, the first Supreme Court justice, he was the Chief Justice for the Supreme Court. John Jay says it behooves us to elect only Christians to our positions, because that's the only way a democracy or a republic can work. But yes, God allows. I mean, all the Roman leaders that were world leaders at some time were unbelievers, yes. Yes, we have to not only follow the laws, we need to respect the leaders. Does not mean we have to agree with them, but yes, we have to respect and pray for our leaders. I mean, Paul makes that very plain. It was Nero that was in power when Paul wrote that we're to pay our taxes and we're to respect our leaders and to see them as God's ordained ministers to us, and we are to pray for them. It can be very difficult. I think I probably break that more than I keep it. So I hate to admit that. All right. Let's go ahead and move into verse 24. Let's back up. Let's back up into verse 22. Here we go. Let's back up to verse 21. And for the people, he moved them into the cities from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. That is, he took them off their own lands, moved them into the cities, some of them. Only the land of the priest he did not buy, for the priest had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave to them. Therefore, they did not sell their lands. Now Joseph said to the people, indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow your land. And it shall come to pass that in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your household, and as food for your little ones. And they said, you have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servant. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to that day, that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priest only, which did not become Pharaoh's. And so again, we see that the Egyptians moved into a dynasty, and that is a time when the pharaohs began to rule, and even before this, started believing themselves to be gods. These pharaohs eventually became so enamored with themselves, they believed themselves to be God, which, by the way, is another attribute of humanity. The Caesars did the same thing. The Caesars started off with a senate and shared wealth and shared power and so forth, but eventually the Caesars took over everything and declared themselves to be gods. So we have all these people who are absolutely forerunners of the beast. the Antichrist that is to come, who will set himself up as government, and then eventually he will take complete control of the whole world, its economy, its religion, and its politics, and he will declare himself to be God. Okay, questions? Verse 27, so Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, now if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh. That was just their way of making an oath. And deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt. Jacob says Grandpa and Grandma was buried in Machpelah in the Promised Land. Dad and Mom were buried in the Promised Land. Please do not leave me here in in Egypt. You take me and bury me when it's time into the Promised Land. But let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. Then he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. Now it came to pass that after these things that Joseph was told, indeed, your father is sick. So we're moving forward about 17 years here. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. That's Joseph's two sons that were born to him in Egypt. And Jacob was told, look, your son Joseph is coming to you. And Israel strengthened himself, and he sat up on his bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you. I will make you a great multitude of people and give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. In other words, Joseph, in your place, are going to be your two boys. That doesn't mean he's kicking Joseph out of the family. It means you get the two. Usually that goes to Reuben, the oldest. That would go to Reuben, the double portion. But he's saying, no, you're going to get the double portion. Your two boys are now going to be two tribes of Israel. Did you know there's no tribe of Joseph? If you name the 12 tribes of Israel, there's no tribe of Joseph. But you'll find the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh. And they are one of the 12, or two of the 12 tribes of Israel. So he is what Abraham did to Isaac and not Ishmael or any of the other boys, and what Isaac did to Jacob and not Esau. Now here is Jacob doing to Joseph. You're the one that I'm going to hand over the mantle to. God gave us a covenant. He doesn't use that word covenant here, but God showed up at Luz, which also was called Bethel, and God made this promise to us that that land is ours and we're going to be living in that land. And so your two boys are now going to be two of the tribes in Israel. He says, your offspring, verse 6, your offspring whom you begot or beget, after them shall be yours. They will be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. But as for me, when I came out of Padan, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons, and he said, who are you? And Joseph, now his dad couldn't see very well, and Joseph said to his father, these are my sons whom God has given to me in this place. And he said, please bring them to me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. Then Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, but in fact God has shown me your offspring. So Joseph brought them before, or from beside his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both. Ephraim was on his right hand toward Israel's left hand. Manasseh was on Joseph's left hand, which would be Jacob's right hand, okay, or Israel's right hand. And he brought them near. Then Israel stretched out his right hand, and he laid it on Ephraim's. So he set them out, and the oldest boy was going to be the one on the right hand. That's the one of the blessing of power. And he's going to lay hands on both these boys. So he put them in order. This is the older boy. This is the younger boy. And Jacob reaches like this and sets his hands on top of their heads to bless them. Now, Joseph here is going to say, Dad, no, just a second. This is the older one. And Dad's going to say, I know. I know which one's the older one. But God has told me. He doesn't use those words. But he stretched out his hands in verse number 14, and he laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand he laid on Manasseh's head, guiding his hand knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who fed me with all my lifelong days, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. Let my name be named among them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. And let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Now, when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took hold of his dad's hand, and he took it off Ephraim's head to put it over on Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not so, my father, for this one's the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people. He also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. So Ephraim is going to be the one that is going to be blessed over Manasseh. When the children of Israel eventually divide after the time of David and after the time of Solomon, they divide into two nations. It will be the nation Israel will also be called Ephraim. That'll be the name they'll call it by oftentimes. And so the southern tribe will be called Judah, will be called after the name of Judah. And so he says this one's going to be the one that's going to be more important. Verse 21, Then Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I am dying, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers. He got the double portion, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. And Jacob called his sons and said, Gather together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Now, this is a very interesting chapter, and sometime, I think it's been a while, in fact, a year or two, maybe a little longer. I preached a message on what is called the judgment seat of Jacob, because this is really what is happening at this point. He's going to pull in all of his sons, and he's going to tell them what their place or a curse or a blessing upon them. Now listen, every one of the children of Israel will be there. Every one of the children of Israel will be a part of the kingdom, and they will play a part in the kingdom. But Jacob is prophesying and blessing or cursing and saying, this is going to be your place in the kingdom of Israel. Now, if you take that and you set that alongside what Jesus said is going to happen and what Paul said is going to happen at the judgment seat of Christ. At the judgment seat of Christ, everyone in this room who is saved is going to be there. All of God's children will be there. Everyone. But at the judgment seat of Christ, it's going to establish what is going to be our role in the kingdom that is to come. What part are we going to play? Some he's going to bless, and he's going to crown, and he's going to give good things to. Others, he's basically going to rebuke. And what Paul says about that day when we, each one of us, have to stand before the judgment seat of Christ, that every one of us must give an account of our lives. If we built our lives after we became a Christian upon wood and straw and hay, wood and stubble, if we build our lives on that, that's going to be burned up. But if we do it with gold, silver, and precious stones, that will withstand the fire. He says the fire of judgment of God is going to come one day. So when we go through this, I want you to know this is a foreshadow of an event you and I must participate in. If you're a child of God, you're not going to miss out on the judgment seat of Christ. You have to be there. In the 7-year tribulation period, while hell is breaking loose here on the earth, and all the things God's pouring out his wrath upon the earth are taking place, you and I will be in heaven. And at some point in those 7 years, you're going to stand before Jesus. And you're going to give an account of your life. Now, you're never going to get kicked out of the family. You belong to God. But some are going to be disappointed at the judgment seat of Christ because they think they have done some things that they deserve. They deserve better than what they think they've been given. So just keep that in mind. So here's what's happening. Joseph is about to die. So Joseph calls in all of his sons, and he gathers them together in verse number 2. He says, "Hear, you sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father." He starts with the oldest. He says, "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power." That is, that's what I hope for you. Your position would have warranted power and dignity. But notice what he says, "Unstable as water, you shall not excel. Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up into my couch." Now, Reuben is called first, and Reuben thinks, I don't know if he's talked to Joseph. I believe Reuben thinks at this point he gets the double portion. He's the oldest. That's what you normally would do. And that he will be appointed a leader over his brothers. Now, he knows the prophecy that Joseph is going to lead in some part, but he thinks there's going to be something good going to happen. But Reuben is crushed at the judgment seat because he comes expecting. And when Dad begins to talk about, "You were the beginning of my strength. You were my firstborn. There was so much potential here for you to excel. But because of hidden sin in your life, you're not getting anything. You don't get anything in the kingdom that is to come." And he talks about a sin that happened years before. It actually happened right after Rachel died. While Israel is still mourning the loss of his beloved Rachel, Reuben goes into one of the handmaids, Rachel's handmaid, and has sexual relationship with her. That was his dad's wife. And so it's never really mentioned at all, other than in Scripture. Jacob doesn't go and confront his son and say, "What in the world were you thinking, boy?" It was never dealt with. Reuben never came and confessed it to the father, but the father knew it. There are going to be people at the judgment seat of Christ, and maybe you've done a lot of good things in your life. Maybe you've taught Sunday school class. Maybe you've done some wonderful works that you think have earned you some crowns. But listen, the one thing that will rob you of the crowns are hidden sin. When we have sin in our lives, and maybe no one else knows about it. I don't know if these other boys, when Dad says these words, they thought, "What in the world is he talking about?" I don't know if they knew what Reuben did or not, but the father knew. He understood what had happened. Now, is Reuben kicked out? No. And we're not going to be kicked out of the judgment seat of Christ because Jesus died for our sins. But if after we're saved, we have hidden sin in our lives that we didn't confess and get rid of and seek the Father's forgiveness, then that's going to be brought up. I like the way that the Bible puts it. That which is hidden is going to be revealed. Now stop and think about that. Now that could be good, what you did, and nobody else knows what you did, but you did some wonderful things. That which is hidden is going to be unveiled. But it's also secret sin. That which you have hidden from others and you think you got by with it, at the judgment seat of Christ, it will be uncovered. Now, there's no judgment in the sense of punishment for that. All it says here is, Reuben, you don't get a prominent place in the kingdom that is to come. You had hidden sin, and therefore you are as unstable as water and shall not excel. In fact, Reuben never had a king, a priest, or a judge ever come out of the tribe of Reuben. Not anyone. No one of real grandeur ever come out. He was his dad's pride and joy as a firstborn son would be, but he never really accomplished anything. In fact, Reuben stayed on the east side of the Jordan River. They had their allotment on the east side of the Jordan River and was one of the first tribes to be overrun when the Babylonians came and were taken into captivity. Actually, they were taken with the Assyrians. All right, then he comes to Simeon and Levi in verse 5. Now, Simeon and Levi are not twins, but they because they're of the same mother, but they are two boys that are just kind of bound together. They have the same character. They were partners in wickedness, diabolically clever, immensely cruel, and he's going to point that out. Simeon and Levi are brothers, instruments of cruelty in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their council, let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And so these two, Levi would be scattered throughout as priests. They're going to be a little bit redeemed from what Phineas does later. Don't get into all that, but they're going to get a little bit of redemption. But they're spread, but also so is Simeon. You hardly ever hear anything about Simeon. They had their land in the land also of Judah. And so they are condemned. Where Reuben was crushed, the father just simply condemns them. They were deceitful. They destroyed the entire city of Shechem. They slew every man. They took the entire group of people and made them their slaves. They took all their possessions. It was actually Simeon who probably was the leader in Joseph's abduction, because it is Simeon that when all the rest of the boys got to go back home to dad and take some food back to the family and go home, and you can't come again unless you bring Benjamin with you, Simeon was kept in prison. And so I think at that point Joseph was probably saying, you were the ringleader in all this, and Joseph was there when it all happened, and he made him stay in prison in Egypt. And so their fierce anger, their cruelty brought embarrassment to their father, but also brought danger to the family. They were discredited among the nations for what these two boys did. They were a terrible witness to the tribes and to the peoples around them. These two boys were just terrible individuals. And if you remember the story, they not only did it, Dad came to them, and pretty much Dad was quite upset because he knew that the people around them are going to get even. Now, God didn't allow them to get even, but Dad comes and Dad strongly rebukes them. Anybody remember what they did? They justified their anger. Should we let somebody treat our sister that way? So instead of repenting, now, how many of you have ever been in a business meeting when people get in the flesh and they get anger and they throw fits? You've never seen one here since I've been here. I know that in 30 years. But some of you have been in churches, and some of you were in this church years ago where those things happened. People who cannot control their anger. They don't care what anybody else thinks. They're going to get their way. And you better not cross me. And they bully everybody else. And when the pastor or someone comes to them and say, brother, that's not the way to behave. Well, they jump right back in their face. Well, that's what they... don't tell me I can't do that. Those who justify those things, when you stand before the Lord Jesus Christ, you're going to be condemned. You may not even have an inheritance in the kingdom that is to come. You'll be there, but you'll be there as by fire. You won't have much in your control. Then comes Judah in verses 8 through 12. Verses 8 through 12 says, and Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Judah means praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. And of course, that would be David, but also Jesus, who is a descendant of Judah. Your father's children shall bow down before you. They bowed down before David, and they will bow down one day before Jesus. Judah is a lion's whelp. Jesus is the lion of Judah. He's of the tribe of Judah. As a lion he shall rouse. His scepter, that is the ruling rod, shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people, binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's coat to the choice vine. Now notice here's the key. He washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. And so he comes to Judah. Now, I don't know. I wasn't there that day when this all happened. But I can imagine when Reuben came forward and Daddy revealed Reuben's sin before everybody, and Reuben is crushed, and then here comes these two boys, Simeon and Levi, and Dad condemns them for their wickedness and what they did. I'm sure when Dad said, Judah, step up, I'm sure Judah was thinking, oh no, oh no, oh no. Because we remember the story in chapter 38 of Judah. We remember his part also in the story of Joseph. And a lot of other things that we remember about Judah. And I'm sure Judah is coming forward and Judah is thinking, oh goodness, he must have been, his past life was terrible at times. But Dad didn't say anything about his sin. Dad didn't condemn him. In fact, Dad said, you're going to be crowned. You get a crown. And you're going to be a special person in the kingdom that is to come. Your tribe will be a special place in the kingdom that is to come. And it gives us a little key. Why him and not the others? It says, he washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. That is a kind of an idea of repentance. Judah is also the one that when they went into Egypt and they were going to keep Benjamin in Egypt, and he didn't know Joseph was a part of all this at this time, he stepped up and says, no, please, let my brother Benjamin go home. I will take his place. I'll be his substitute. I'll be your servant forever. And so he puts himself as the substitute here. And so what makes the difference at the judgment seat of Christ? What if we spent or misspent much of our lives? What if we have done things so horrendous, even as what Levi and Simeon does? Does that mean we can't excel at the judgment seat of Christ? No. Here's the key. Repent. Get it straightened out with God. Take it to the Father. Ask God's forgiveness. And then begin to serve God faithfully. And at the judgment seat of Christ, then there will be crowns that will come to you. If you don't do those things, then it's not going to be very pretty. So he receives the crown. Then go to Zebulun in verse 13. Zebulun's going to be comforted at the judgment seat of Christ. Zebulun shall dwell by the haven of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall adjoin sided. So he's just comforted at the judgment seat of Christ. Rarely mentioned in all of Scripture is the tribe of Zebulun. There's neither good nor bad mentioned about them. They always seem to be in the background, often overlooked, sometimes probably even neglected. They weren't one of the bigger families. But listen, Nazareth is out, the city of Nazareth is from the city, from the tribe of Nazareth. So is Cana of Galilee. Those were in there. And so they were comforted. But then here comes Issachar, and I'm gonna have to run quickly down through this because I'm running out of time. Issachar is blessed as well in verse number 14 down through 15. Dan in verse 16. It says, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. The word Dan literally means judge. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path. Dan is the first tribe to go into apostasy, the first tribe to go into idolatry. Dan is not even mentioned in the 12 tribes of Israel in the book of Revelation. When there are 12 tribes are mentioned, there's going to be 12,000 people come from each one of these tribes that will be God's witnesses on the earth. Dan's not even mentioned at that time. Okay, doesn't mean he was kicked out, but it does mean that he did not receive. These people who think they can, well, let me move on. Verse 19. Gad, verse 19. Asher, verse 20. Naphtali, verse 21. And I wanted to get to Joseph. Joseph, when Joseph comes to the judgment seat of Jacob, Joseph comes confident. He comes knowing what his part is going to be. Why? He's already been with the Father. Remember the chapter before us? He's already been in Jacob's presence. He's already been blessed. His two boys have knelt down before his father. And he already knows what his standing is with the Father. And so at the judgment seat of Christ, he comes, I think, boldly to the judgment seat of Christ. These are people who, from the time they were young, they turned their hearts to the Lord. These are people who served Jesus most all of their life. These are people who were faithful. You don't find the sin that you do of Reuben. You don't find the anger issues that you did with Simeon and Levi. You don't find some of the sordid stories that you have of Judah. But Joseph comes and he knows what his position is going to be. Now, what's the difference between Judah? Judah gets crowned also, and Joseph is crowned in a sense as well, because he says, you're going to be leading my people. He says to Joseph. What's the difference? Well, which one would you rather be? Would you rather spend most of your life doing things that are not good and nasty and naughty and finally come to the Lord? Or would you like to be one of those kids that are raised up in a Christian home and that all your life you spent trying to serve the Lord? Not perfectly, but you're trying to serve the Lord. Those are the people who are going to come before the judgment seat of Christ, and they have no fears, they have no qualms. They've been in the Father's presence so often, they know what their position is going to be in the judgment seat of Jesus. Then, if you will, go down to verse 27. That is Benjamin. He's a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. I don't have time to do this, but Benjamin is that group of people that when you get to the book of Judges, that remember the Levite that had a concubine, the men came to rape. This is the tribe of Benjamin. These are Israelites. It's the Sodom and Gomorrah story all over. And remember, they raped this woman to death all night long. That was the tribe of Benjamin. And Benjamin eventually was slaughtered by the rest of the tribes. Only 600 men of Benjamin were left to restart the tribe of Benjamin. So eventually Benjamin was engulfed in Judah. It was the tribe that was engulfed with Judah. And so Benjamin also, in a sense, was condemned at this point as well. Now, verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is their father. Their father spoke to them. He blessed them, and he blessed each one according to his own blessing. So the judgment seat of Jacob was all of Jacob's children were there. Not a one was missing. All of them stood before their father. All of them received instruction about what their part in the kingdom was going to be, the kingdom of Israel was going to be. And some were blessed, and some were condemned. but all went into the kingdom. When we come before the judgment seat of Christ, it's going to be that same way. We all are going to be there, and some are going to be blessed, and some are going to be condemned. Not thrown out of heaven, not thrown out of the kingdom, but they're just not going to have a prominent place in the kingdom which is to come. Some of you may say, I don't care, I just want to be there. Okay, I understand that, but in the day of judgment, when you stand before Jesus, who paid it all for you, who did everything for you, who has blessed you in every possible way, and you've got nothing to offer, I'm not sure you're going to want to be standing there that way. Verse 29, and he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephraim the Hittite, as a possession for a burial place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I buried Leah. Now, notice there, Rachel wasn't there. When Leah died, he buried her because Leah was his first wife and should have been his only wife. And she and he are buried together in the cave at Machpelah. Verse 32, the field and the cave that is there was purchased from the sons of Heth. And when Jacob had finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into his bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. He died. So we got to see the whole life of Jacob and the beginning of what we know as Israel, the nation of Israel, and the part that they would play in the kingdom that was to come. All right, questions or thoughts? You'd think that Messiah might come out of the tribe of Joseph because he was a good one, but God chose no. In fact, it had to be, I think, out of the sons of Leah, because Leah was his real wife. Now, I'm not saying the other three weren't his wife as well, but God bless you. We are done.